Hello, this is Frank Palladino, founder of EternalBard.com and the Eternal Bard Literary Archive, where we upload public domain works of literature for the enjoyment of our readers and create public domain narrations of public domain works of literature for the enjoyment of our listeners. I want to talk to you today about Article 13, the new directive passed in the European Union. Also, it has been renamed Article 17, so you can think of it Article 13/17. I want to talk to you particularly about paragraph 4, which talks about the duties and burdens which will be placed on online content sharing service providers. Arguably, our public domain works of literature platform could be considered a content sharing service provider. And as this paragraph says, paragraph 4, if no authorization is granted, online content sharing service providers shall be liable for unauthorized acts of communication to the public, including making available to the public of copyright protected works and other subject matter, unless the service providers demonstrate that they have, and then there's different sections here. Section A, made best efforts to obtain an authorization, and Section B, made in accordance with high industry standards of professional diligence, best efforts to ensure the unavailability of specific works and other subject matter for which rights holders have provided the service providers with relevant and necessary information. And in any event, Section C, acted expeditiously upon receiving a sufficiently substantiated notice from rights holders to disable access to or remove from their websites the notified works or other subject matter, and made best efforts to prevent their future uploads in accordance with point B. Now, what does this mean for us as a platform? Well, to begin with, we're too small of a platform yet to have gone through the paperwork to become an official nonprofit platform. So there is talk of an exemption for nonprofit platforms. This is on www.article13.org. There's an explanation page with the final version, and they go paragraph by paragraph. And in the first piece of explanation, underneath the title, they explain that things like Wikipedia and open source nonprofit platforms will be exempt. I don't see anywhere on this page where that specific exemption is laid out. I've made it to the bottom. Perhaps under formal review, there will be some exemption. I don't know how it's going to be tied to nonprofit status. But there's this notion that only people who are making a lot of money are going to be affected. That isn't really spelled out in a clear way. So even though we don't make any money, really, we operate at a loss for this platform where we share public domain works of literature. I don't understand how I am exempt or how this platform is exempt from these rules. It's not clear in this explanation here. Moreover, do we act expeditiously upon receiving substantiated notice? We have a section on the site where we talk about copyright notice, how to make a claim, and we act what we feel is as expeditious as we feel is best. We do not have the resources to have somebody 24/7 answering these claims, not yet. Perhaps larger sites like Project Gutenberg will have a better chance at doing this, and I would suggest that you go there. But for now, our stance is we're just going to allow access to the video sharing portion of the site, which is for the moment hosted by YouTube, and deny access for the literary archive portion of the site. That's how we are going to move forward with these rules. We have no bad intentions. We publish public domain works of literature. That is our stated goal. That is what we do, but what is in the public domain will vary from country to country. Rather than taking my word for it, you can ask people who have a lot of experience in this matter. For example, you can go to Project Gutenberg and they have an explanation for you on how public domain works in different countries. Will we be affected? It's hard to say. We're based fully in the US as far as where we host the servers and where we are located. However, we are going to be defensive when it comes to this article. And at the present time, until such case law or such exemptions can be spelled out in a way that's clear to us, we are going to alleviate any sort of legal risk by blocking the literary archive from the relevant region. We apologize for the inconvenience that is going to go along with this, and we hope that if you are inconvenienced by this, some of our larger, you could say affiliates, though we have no direct affiliation, they have a similar mission. Some of the larger services which will share public knowledge, things such as Project Gutenberg, LibriVox, and Wikipedia, much larger services with many more resources than we have available, quite frankly. Hopefully these resources will still be available to people in the European Union, and we would encourage them to use these resources. But unfortunately, our literary archive will be off limits from the point when this goes into effect. I just wanted to touch on this very briefly, give a heads up to everybody, and apologize in advance for any inconvenience this might cause. Now, regarding the larger portion of our work, which is the audio recordings, the audio books that we create, we are hosting them currently on YouTube, and so there may be a burden there and there may not be. The burden from that perspective might come from the fact that YouTube will have to put some upload limits in place because of the extra burden. We will see how that develops going forward. Our content isn't very valuable to them, understandably, and similar sorts of content where narrations of public domain works of literature may fall as a victim to any sort of identification algorithms. Main reason being that they're public domain works, so anybody can narrate them, so you can have multiple narrations on the site. And if they use some sort of grouping algorithm to try and check the text to see if people are uploading the same text, they will just have to maybe evaluate different batches, and arguably there's not much motivation for them to be kind of light-handed with this. So we're going to see how it affects our presence on YouTube and other video sharing sites and what it's going to mean for our audio book communications. We may have to host them ourselves, which will place a very large cost on our service. And that being the case, it's going to be very difficult for us to continue to share them at our current level of funding. If you want to support what we do, please feel free to go to the site. The site is eternalbard.com, and please donate. That will allow us to host them ourselves. Aside from this, we're just going to have to play it by ear. Now, why does the European Union think that this won't be a problem for us? Well, they also pass laws making it so that if you think it was unfair that the parody you posted was taken down by YouTube or Facebook, you'll have the right to at least know why. And they think that this is going to be enough to, so it says because platforms will have to provide ways for users and rights holders to appeal decisions. So they think it's going to be enough for us to keep, well, they're not thinking about us specifically, but for creators in general to keep their things on YouTube, their things on these platforms. Arguably, trying to force these platforms into hosting our content isn't going to work. If they have to appeal, that just means that they should put more of a burden on people uploading. Perhaps they'll look at your commercial success after 50 or so uploads, and if you haven't reached a certain level or metric of success, they'll decide that the cost of monitoring and dealing with all these appeals to your uploads isn't worth it, or and then just say, sorry, it's not commercially viable for us to upload or to host your uploads. I have no idea what's going to happen. I know that they're already demonetizing many narration channels. Horror Babble just got demonetized. They've read a number of public domain works on their channel, and many other narration channels have been demonetized. I can only imagine that if more onus is placed on the platforms, that is going to increase so that they'll be going further than just demonetizing these various narration channels. They may have to put limits on how much they can upload, or they may have certain types of channels that they don't allow. Instead of being very clear about these sorts of things, YouTube tends to just change their definitions around or claim that you fall under a certain definition and not get back to you when you have a problem. This has happened to many much larger narration channels than mine. One thing they could say is that they consider this thing to be spam, and they have policies against spam. What's spam? It's basically content that they find is of little value, is what they classify as spam. So what could be considered spam? Many more things. Perhaps the narrations we make could be considered spam. It's quite possible. If you want to have these available, and if YouTube shuts it down, we will need a certain level of donations to make these available in a streaming format. If we do not reach that, we are going to have to increase our presence in terms of audio downloads. But even that will become rather complicated because we'll have to ensure that you are not in the European Union to make these audio downloads, because we're getting no money from this, so it's very difficult for us to take on that risk. And paying for the bandwidth is even going to be very difficult. So how we're going to continue if YouTube doesn't continue to support our content and make it available on the audio side of things is questionable. So the entire site could really be taken down to just the point where it's a literary archive only, and it could be diminished quite substantially, to the point where it's not even worth going to the site. So it's definitely a concern for us, and we'll be monitoring this, and we'll get back to you as soon as it's clear what the next step should be. But for right now, what we host, the literary archive, when these rules go into effect, is going to be off limits to people in the EU. That's the decision that we've made and come to right now. And that's how we feel will best work with this new set of legislation that we're dealing with. As things develop, as a path becomes clear, we may reopen it again. What you have to understand is that this is a volunteer effort, and we would rather spend our time doing what we do, which is formatting and creating these audiobooks, than trying to work through laws and understand and navigate these different laws. And we don't even feel bad necessarily about turning this off and blocking it, because thankfully there are other services. Now hopefully those services won't do the same. That's going to be up to them, and they're bigger. They have the resources, they have the manpower, they have the teams that they can use to determine what the next steps and what the best course of action is. I'm sure they can reach out to certain people. It says that Wikipedia won't be affected, so how that works. Maybe you have to get a certain nonprofit tag that goes with it. Maybe you have to file some legal paperwork and become an official nonprofit. At which point, well, we're going to have to continue as a profit-based thing, because we haven't gotten to the point where we can do all the nonprofit infrastructure yet. But maybe that's something we can look into, getting all the paperwork put together so that we can become an official nonprofit. This started as just a personal website that I myself am hosting, and I'm hoping that it will grow into something like a movement, but it's hard to say, and there are already other movements out there. We just feel that we can do a better job. And by we, I'm thinking of the organization that I'm hoping to grow in the future, but for right now, it's only me. I'm thinking I can do a good job providing these audiobooks because I have experience in different kinds of technology sectors where I can bring that effort to bear and automate a lot of what humans are doing by volunteer work right now. And I'm hoping that it will help people. But I have to operate within whatever bounds are put in front of me, I suppose. Sorry for the rambling nature of this message. Toward the end, I feel like I ended up rambling a bit. Hopefully, it clarifies our position and it explains what some of the challenges might be for, some of the smaller sites that host works. Usually they're nonprofit type things, and hopefully it'll become clearer as time goes on where the exemption is, what it's tied to, and how that whole thing works. Who knows? Maybe because we're completely based in the U.S., we'll be exempt from that reason. Anyway, thank you for your time. This is the Eternal Bard letting you go. Goodbye.